guys, it's Caroline from Money Mindset Accelerator. I hope you're having an awesome day. So I'm a bit dressed up today, got my party dress on, got the red lipstick. I'm actually just about to head out to a ball. I haven't been to a ball in a really long time. So the event is, I think it's the 30th anniversary of the scholarship program that I did at university. And so they're having a big alumni ball, which I'm really quite excited about because a lot of my friends are going. And yeah, the friends that I actually see quite often. So we're just going to have a ball, literally, and just have a big party, which will be cool. But I just wanted to shoot you guys a quick video. And yesterday I spoke about self-limiting beliefs and how you can actually identify if you have money blocks. And I said I would give you a bit more information about where self-limiting beliefs actually come from. And so let me just explain that for you. So when we talk about self-limiting beliefs, I tend to use that interchangeably with the word paradigms, which you may or may not heard of, may not, jumbling all over my words, you may or may not have heard of paradigms. Basically, paradigms are a multitude of your thoughts, your habits, your behavior, your beliefs. So sometimes I think when we get talking about self-limiting beliefs, we tend to think we're just talking about thoughts. And it's a lot more than that. It really becomes about, in a way, like your character, but even your character becomes the sum of things that you do all the time. So your habits end up leading to certain thoughts that you have around, for example, what your capabilities are. And yeah, sometimes people will think they're not capable of doing something, and that may have come about just because of a series of bad habits. But the thing that I want to draw your attention to today is that self-limiting beliefs actually get formed when you're quite young. So around the ages of, I'll probably get the exact age wrong, I'm not a trained psychologist, but it's loosely around sort of the age of like 4 or 5, sometimes, maybe 6. And essentially what happens is when you're that young, your conscious mind isn't fully formed. So you're still very impressionable, and your ability to challenge things and interpret them and either accept them or reject them based on your choice doesn't really exist at that point. And so as a young child with an impressionable mind, you tend to accept everything that happens around you. And so what happens to a lot of people is that, I don't know if you can actually remember back to when you were 4 or 5, but we get really impacted by things that were going on around us. So there's our immediate circle, there's what it was like growing up with your parents or your caregivers, and, whether they were happy, whether they argued, whether money was tight. You would have formed a lot of your beliefs about money and whether you make money easily or whether money's hard to come by or whether money runs out. A lot of that would have been just from overhearing conversations that your parents might have had. Or you may have even heard, your parents say the classic, money doesn't grow on trees, or rich people are greedy. And so they're the kinds of things that end up influencing your beliefs about money. And it all happens when you're quite young, and you don't have the ability at that point to challenge those beliefs. So unless something happens where, you're mentored or you set down a deliberate path to change those beliefs, they just become, who you are. And so sometimes you'll come across someone who's really struggling, and they'll say, I hate talking to people, or I can't sell, or I can't do this. And they'll say, that's just the way I am. I've never been any good at it. And look, to some extent, that's true based on your experience. Yes, that's the way you are. But I would challenge you to start saying, actually, that's the way I've been programmed. So all it is programming. It's something that you learned from somewhere quite early on. You never challenged it, and therefore it's become your belief and your actions, and therefore who you think you are. And so that's actually great news, because anything that's programmed within us can be unprogrammed and then reprogrammed differently. And, that's really where my work comes in. And I run a boot camp where we devote a lot of time and effort into working out your energy around money and what your specific self-limiting beliefs are. And I show you how to actually challenge those and change them permanently. And once you're able to do that, like actually shift the energy that you operate with, then you're able to change your actions, but do it authentically as well, so that you're not sort of forcing yourself to do something against the tide that feels unauthentic for you. So the last thing I wanted to touch on is just with regards to how self-limiting beliefs actually form. You may or may not know this, but there's two ways that we collect our self-limiting beliefs. So one of them, and our paradigms generally, it doesn't just have to be self-limiting beliefs, it can be positive beliefs as well. So the two ways are shock and repetition. So for most people, repetition is how we most commonly pick up our self-limiting beliefs. So this is the example I talked about, which is where you would have heard conversations, you would have seen experiences, maybe even, just things happening around you, like regular world events that sort of shaped your understanding of, maybe economics and what kind of an environment you grew up in. So these are things that happen around you all the time. And because you don't challenge them initially, that's how they become part of who you are, because of the repetition. And equally, that's why today you see people like adults using affirmations. So it's trying to use the process of repetition to overlay a new paradigm. Where people go wrong with that, though, is that if you don't know how to change your original paradigm, and I mean how to actually neutralize it and clear it, then you don't actually believe your new affirmations. And so repetition in that case, it will eventually work, but not many of us have years to turn our results around, or you certainly don't want to wait that long. Like if you're trying to get a business up and running, you've only got so long before cash flow becomes an issue. So you can't wait 3 years for your affirmations to kick in. And actually it can have the opposite effect, where if you continue to not see results based on your affirmation, then you start to reject them even more, and you take opposite kinds of actions to sabotage your results. Okay, so that's repetition. The other way that you can start a paradigm, either when you're early or even much later in life, is through shock. So this is where something happens and the impact is so great that it shakes up any previous belief that you had, and almost in an instant, your view of how life is, how you are, how the world is, can change. And one example of that always springs to mind for me is September 11. I will never forget where I was in the moment that I heard about the tragedy of September 11. I remember that day in so much detail. And I even remember that for weeks afterwards, just my sense of safety and my belief that the world was a safe place was just completely overturned. And yeah, I just felt like, this world that I'd believed was, just completely safe, and that nothing like that could ever happen, had suddenly kind of fallen apart. I just never imagined that something like that so horrible could happen. And so that's an example of shock. And even though, over time, probably my sense of safety has been restored somewhat, I've just never forgotten that moment and the impact that it had on my life. And, similar things happen to people. You'll hear stories of people who had a heart attack, and the shock was so great that they completely changed their diet, started exercising, and then went on to become one of the healthiest people that you know. So they're examples of shock that change your paradigms and self-limiting beliefs. But shock is a lot harder to use when you're older if you're trying to change self-limiting beliefs in particular. I know in psychology they use things like shock therapy, and I certainly don't do anything like that. So when it comes to changing your self-limiting beliefs, when you're trying to get better results in your life, then I would certainly suggest using repetition as my preferred method. So that's it for today. In a future video, I will start to talk to you more about exactly how you use repetition to change those self-limiting beliefs, especially if you're finding your affirmations aren't working for you. So I hope you got some value out of that video. I'm Caroline Labor. I am off to a party, off to have a lot of fun. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.